Hey y'all, this is Texans Takes with James Roy. I'm James Roy and I'm here to bring you some Texans Takes. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the rookie numbers. I'm going to try and guess, just based off the numbers that are available on the roster right now, which number each rookie is going to have. We're also going to discuss the recent resurgence of the uniform discussion as spurred on by Hannah McNair's comments at the press conference at the charity golf event. Is there Columbia Blue? Do we want Columbia Blue? And we're also going to look at the quarterback position and do a breakdown of who I think is going to make the roster at that position. And we'll close with some Texans takes on Twitter. I asked you on Twitter what you wanted my takes on, and you responded. So first, let's talk about the rookie numbers. Now, either today or tomorrow, the Texans will probably be announcing the rookie numbers. They've alluded to it about a week ago Thursday, so I can only guess that on Thursday they will, though Thursday is also when they're going to announce the schedule, so they might do it a day earlier. But I took a look at the roster. I found all the numbers that were not currently occupied by a player, and I'm going to try and assign a number to the players and guess just based off what's available. I'm not going to say, in CJ Stroud's case, I'm not going to guess 7 because as of right now, that's Kaimi Fairbairn's number. I assume that CJ is probably going to work something out with Kaimi to get the number, but for now it's his. So we'll start with CJ. CJ, first pick at the number 2 spot. Numbers that kind of fit here, there's only 3, 13, 15, and 19 are available. It's my natural instinct to go with the lowest of those numbers. So I think I'm going to go with 13. But like I said, I don't necessarily think that CJ is going to get 13. He'll probably work something out for 7. Next is Will Anderson. There's quite a few numbers that fit kind of around where he would be. I know he wore 31 in college. Numbers in the general area I'd expect him to be are like 27, 36, 39, maybe all the way up through 45. There's 40, 41, 43, 44, 45. If I'm guessing, I'm going to say either 27 or 36. If I have to give you a hard and fast answer, I'm going with 27. And then Juice Scruggs, this is probably the easiest pick because it is the only player, as far as my memory allows me to remember, that his number is just available. So 70 is there. I would guess that Juice Scruggs is probably going to be given number 70. Tank Dell. I would assume he wants to go with a lower number. There's numbers like 81, 87, 88. 80 is available, but I can only assume that no one's going to wear that number. I could be wrong, but 80 and 99 are numbers that I would say personally probably untouchable. So with that, I'm stuck between 15 and 19 because I already gave 13 to CJ Stroud. I'd probably go with 19. I just think that he'd go with the higher of the two numbers. But like I said, I think they might clear space in the lower numbers, but 13 is the lowest available number right now on the roster. Dylan Horton wore 98 in college, I believe. And so the only number available in the 90s is 92. So I'm going to go with 92 for Dylan Horton. Henry, oh geez, I promise you I'm going to mess up this name, but it's To'otu. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Heard it said multiple times. Not fully sure I could get it right, but he wore 10 in college. I think he might go with a number in the 40s. If I'm guessing, I would probably say 44 or 45. 44. We'll go with 44. Jarrett Patterson, center, Notre Dame. His number was in the 50s in college, I believe. There's only 51 or 57. I mean, I'd like to think he'd go with 51. I like centers wearing lower numbers, I think that it just makes sense to me. And then you've got Xavier Hutchinson. Wore 8 in college. I assume he's going to go with like a number in the 80s. I might like to see him wear 88. I think just double down. He's progressed, so now he will wear 88. So that's my best guess for him. Brandon Hill. I think he wore 27 in college. I gave 27 to Will Anderson, so I'll say he's going to wear 36. I think that's a good number for him. It's hard to guess now. I can only assume that the Texans are probably going to move some people around. There's some people that have numbers that probably are like less than likely to make the roster. So I can't imagine that these players aren't going to get like closer to the numbers that they want. But those are my best guesses for now. Recently at the charity golf tournament, the question was brought up of new uniforms again. It's kind of a topic that's had time to cool off a bit, but we do know the Texans have pulled the fan base and they're moving towards bringing in a new uniform. There's a certain part of the fan base that would really like to see a shade off of Columbia blue since they technically can't do that, but they want to see the Oilers colors. Personally, it's not necessarily my favorite thing. I'm not going to trash the uniforms if that happens, but being a younger member of the fan base, having been 7 when the team came to town, the Astrodome was only open for Astros games for 5 years of my life, and I never went to one in the Astrodome. And also the Oilers they were out of town before I knew how to talk. So honestly, I don't have a huge connection to him. I understand with, Oil and Houston and the deeper connection with the history of the franchise. But honestly, if you want my personal opinion on what I think the Texans should do with uniforms, maybe go with a bolder design. I just don't want it to be something like the Jaguars or the Browns, or even like the Seahawks aren't bad, but like that's like the vein of uniforms that I'm not trying to see. And then there's also people that don't want to see it become more Patriot-esque. I think maybe they should lean deeper into the red of the uniform that currently is. I don't necessarily think that they need to change the colors. I think that maybe you put the horns on the helmet instead of the logo. That's something I'd be open to if it's done well. There's some people that have told me they've seen concepts and that they think that we're going to like it. I hope I like the new uniforms. Otherwise, you'll catch me at the clearance rack trying to grab a classic throwback Texans uniform, as we'll finally be able to say when this happens. But personally, as long as it doesn't lean too heavy into the Oilers roots, for me, I'd be happy. I wouldn't be mad if it did. I just would rather it not. I'd be happier, I should say, if they stay away from the Oilers roots. So I'd like to break down which players I think are going to make the roster from each position as we progress through the offseason. And to me, the easiest position to do this for is quarterback. It wouldn't seem that way from some of the discussions that I've had on Twitter, but to me, it's quite obvious. There's some people that saw the signing of EJ Perry as a sign that Mills' spot on the roster is not there and that he'll probably be practice squad or off. I mean, I think unless Davis Mills is traded, that Davis Mills is assured a spot on the roster. And I'll tell you personally that regardless of the animosity you have towards him as a quarterback or how his tenure as starter went, honestly, he's the best option on the roster for a backup quarterback. And you can't look at how he played and go, yeah, he was trash. He wasn't the worst quarterback in the entire league. And if you're better than any quarterback in the NFL, you're probably good enough to play backup. We're not looking at Davis Mills to light up this guy if he has to step in for CJ Stroud. But I don't get why we're talking about Davis Mills not being the backup if he's still on the roster when the season rolls around. This talk of Case Keenum, I get it. Okay, I have nostalgia for Case Keenum too. I loved what he did, in Minnesota. I know he's played great football. I see him as more of a Joe Flacco role on this roster. I see him like the Jets last year. So, Joe Flacco he played a little backup at points, but for I see late season Joe Flacco where he's the third quarterback that kind of is available. But he's not the one that's expected to go in if CJ Stroud goes down. I'd say that you want to bank on Davis Mills being your option because Case Keenum, I feel like, is just a veteran presence. I mean, he's been in the league 11 years. He has a lot to give to this team from a knowledge perspective. But I would say personally that the signing of Case Keenum wasn't like telling us that Davis Mills wasn't going to be the backup. Now, like I said, the only scenario I see where Davis Mills is not on this roster or is not the backup on this roster is if he's not on the roster. And I don't think it's by way of a cut. I mean, teams have inquired. If rumors can be believed, the Redskins literally called up the Texans to try and get Davis Mills, which should tell you, based on a lot of their quarterback room looks a lot of the same as last year, that they liked him better than what they have right now in Sam Howell. So with that in mind, unless he gets traded, I think Davis Mills is the backup. Obviously, CJ Stroud is the starter in my eyes. I would be frustrated, to say the least, if we got to the start of the season and the guy you picked number 2 overall, they say, well, we don't think he's ready. We think we're gonna let him sit a couple games. Like, sure, but if you're serious and you're a win now team, you drafted him because he's going to be ready week 1. And I don't think the Texans make the trade up to get Will Anderson if they don't think CJ Stroud's going to be ready week 1. In fact, they probably just take Will Anderson at 2 and draft Will Levis at 12. So the fact that they made those moves and they took CJ Stroud at 2 shows me that the Texans believe that CJ Stroud's going to be the week 1 starter. So I have no reason to believe otherwise. Just like I have no reason to believe, unless Davis Mills is traded, that he's not going to be the backup. EJ Perry might be practice squad, maybe, probably, but it's going to go Stroud, Mills, Keenum, and then whatever they decide to do with Perry is my opinion on the matter. Well, guys, I took to Twitter and I asked you for some questions that you'd like me to give my take on when it comes to the Texans, and you guys delivered. I got some good feedback. Let's start with Third Coast Tom. Tom asks, is Kenyon Green a lock to start? And what other position battles do I foresee? I think that one of the reasons we saw Juice Scruggs and Jarrett Patterson be the picks for center with their flexibility of the guard position is simply put, their contingent plans for if Kenyon Green fails to take that step. I think his rookie year was a little disappointing. I made a correlation between, when he was injured briefly, Davis Mills had more time to throw, and when he came back into the game, Davis Mills had less time to throw. I'd love to see Kenyon Green find it this year. I don't think that we're at a point where we're saying, yeah, for sure he's going to be replaced this season, but I think the Texans have put pieces in place so that if Kenyon Green doesn't, live up to what he can be, what I believe he can be, then you got guys like Jarrett Patterson, guys like Juice Scruggs, I mean, if I'm being honest, Juice Scruggs is currently listed as the starting center. So realistically, Jarrett Patterson was the pick that you picked up and were like, okay, maybe this guy can flex into the guard position if Kenyon Green's not got it. Now, Ruben asks, what are our remaining weaknesses? He mentions wide receiver, lack of veterans, new coaches. I would say that outside, wide receiver is very obviously the biggest hole in this Texans roster. Just for the lack of a number 1 wide receiver. I'd love for a guy like Xavier Hutchinson to prove me wrong, or Nico Collins, really anyone who fits the bill to step into a wide receiver 1 role would be great to see them do it. But the question remains to be answered. I would say outside of that, my biggest concern is that with the way we addressed linebacker in the draft, we got great value out of Henry. I think that, but he's still listed on the depth chart behind Christian Kirksey, and he would need to move ahead of him, and he'd need to show that he plays outside of his build. He's a little bit of a smaller build at linebacker, and so coming downhill and stuffing the run and helping with that is not something that's going to come easy to him. He obviously will be in the NFL weight room this offseason. He beef up a little bit, and he's got time. Kirksey's still on the team, although I don't know if he will be. So that raises the question: is Kirksey here or not? And if he's not, is Henry going to have to be ready right away, or are they going to find a different option? Are they going to throw in one of the other linebackers that we signed to play the middle until they feel Henry is ready? But linebacker to me is a big question mark on this team. Chavo from the H asks, are there any dark horse candidates that could start week 1? I don't know if you'd call it a dark horse, but there's part of me that believes, knowing what I know about Xavier Hutchinson, I feel like a 6th round pick is way late to be picked. Great value on him. And I think that based off of his history, he was the wide receiver 1 for Brock Purdy at Iowa State the year before this last one. And he put up great numbers this past year, 1,100 receiving yards on 100 or so receptions. I think personally that when you look at it, he has the build, he has the tools to be a starting wide receiver on this team. And I think I could even go so far as to say that if Nico doesn't step up, we could see Xavier Hutchinson challenge him for that wide receiver 1 role. Now, will it be week 1? I don't know, but I mean, you're asking week 1. I mean, that's what comes to mind for me when I'm thinking, dark horse candidate. That like I think everyone loves the pick of Xavier Hutchinson, but I don't think anyone really expects him to challenge for the starting role week 1. So that could be a dark horse in my eyes. Mikey Fresh asks, how many wide receivers do you think the Texans will keep on their 53, and who are the odd men out? Any surprise cuts who you think the Texans will make before the season? I don't know if it's a surprise cut. I would say I talked about Christian Kirksey earlier. There's a lot of savings to be had there if you can if you feel like you have someone who can step into that role and you feel like you can cut him, then that could save you a lot of cap space. And then as far as wide receivers go, I said before that I think they'll carry about 7. I would say it's Woods, Mechie, Hutchinson, Collins, Brown, and Tank Dell. Yeah, so those are my guys that I think make it. You can make a case for Steve Sims. It seems like he's trying to make his case for like special teams, in which case, Amari Rodgers is the one who's ahead of him on the special teams depth chart. So if he can jump Amari Rodgers, you can only have so many speedsters on a roster, so many small build, short route, short throw, West Coast speedy wide receivers, before you have to cut one. So, maybe he challenges for that. But yeah, that's where I'm at there. And last question, Gonzo Knox asks, a lot of focus on the wide receiver right now, but how much are the tight ends and running backs going to be used in the passing game more than just safety valves? I have expressed in the past that I think that the most important thing that the Texans did since wide receiver wasn't addressed early in the draft was signing Dalton Schultz. Regardless of if he plays past this season, his role will be fulfilled at the end of this season when he has, played his part as the, most important target that CJ Stroud's going to have. In your rookie year, the tight end is your best friend. And if you're Lamar Jackson, the tight end remains your best friend throughout your entire time on a team because they don't give you anyone else to throw to. And so in this case, regardless of how wide receiver pans out, I would expect heavy usage of Dalton Schultz. I think that it's inevitable that backs coming out of the backfield are going to get their time in the passing game, their targets. But I would anticipate, a lot of out of the backfield passes and a lot of a heavy utilization of the tight end. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Dalton Schultz is a 1,000-yard receiver this year. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in this week to Texans Takes with James Roy. I've been James Roy, and if you'd like, you can follow me on social media at M1 Texans Fan. I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And until next time, see ya.